Source. Iceberg charts are a pretty simple premise. It's a method of organizing topics of discussion with the commonly known topics on the top or the tip of the iceberg, while more obscure topics lay beneath the surface. Speaking personally, I really appreciate the format and the videos it spawned. They've done more than their fair share of keeping me sane while I'm at work, cleaning, or organizing or whatever. So as both a show of appreciation and a gift to a friend of mine, I've decided to tackle the Surreal Games iceberg and discuss it with you all. I'll be breaking the iceberg down into separate videos, as some topics get quite lengthy and I don't want to miss any details. However, if you're like me and want to listen to the whole thing in one sitting, I'll be sure to upload a full-length video of the entire thing once I'm all finished up. If you end up enjoying this type of content from me, let me know. I'm always excited to get feedback and I'd really appreciate it. I hope you enjoy the Surreal Games iceberg, and thank you for watching. Yume Nikki is an incredibly strange experience, one I've partaken in myself. Releasing in 2004 by the anonymous Kikiyama, it's the story of a girl named Marutsuki and her dreams. The game consists of non-linear gameplay, strikingly mind-bending visuals, and a legacy that's inspired several other classic games that are to come in discussion later on. Marutsuki's dreams are made up of several different doors, each of which connect in various confusing ways. Your goal is to collect several different effects, each of which change and morph Marutsuki. These items can transform you into a snow woman, let you ride a bicycle, lose your body, and many more. Despite these obtainable items, one might argue the true purpose of the game is simply to explore and absorb the environments you find yourself in. It's available on Steam, and besides its replayability with several random events changing from playthrough to playthrough, there's just so much to unpack I could really never do it justice. And what are games without the avenues to make them? RPG Maker is a game development program that's been around for longer than myself, and most people watching, I'm sure. It's been responsible for several of the best games ever released, including the previously discussed Yume Nikki. Notable titles in the horror genre include Ao Oni, Mad Father, Crooked Man, Corpse Party, and so many more. Another game focusing about the dreamscape. Released in 1998 for the PlayStation 1, LSD Dream Emulator is a game that is explained best as simply a playable dream. It's very avant-garde and experimental, and you can almost see its influence in the aforementioned Yume Nikki. No amount of talking about the game could ever do its magic justice. Despite the simple gameplay, the simple 3D walk-around title holds plethora of the unnerving and mystifying visuals that inspire discussions on its merit as an art piece, something that Osamu Sato, the designer of the game, wanted his project to be seen as. WarioWare is a collection of mini-games, or microgames as they're known, that provides both an exciting experience while also showing the latest that Nintendo's hardware can do. The series is quite long-running, with 9 entries spanning almost 2 decades. It's a stark departure from your average Mario game, instead being all about completing simple tasks in rapid succession, while having a loose narrative about a silly cast of characters. Any game in the series could honestly be considered a classic, and a showcase of both ingenious hardware and gameplay design from the people at Nintendo. Development hell is no match for an Earthbound-inspired RPG about depression. Omori is an RPG released in 2020 by Omocat. The game tackles difficult and touchy subjects such as anxiety, depression, trauma, and even Persona 3. Despite 6 years of delays and difficulties, the game was released to praise of its unique visual style combined with its ability to handle incredibly sensitive topics. The game sees you playing as both Sunny in the real world and Omori in Sunny's headspace. As you fight your way through your dreams in headspace, you begin to figure out why your imagination is as vast as an entire RPG in the real world. Climax of this game is truly spectacular, culminating in a flurry of memories, emotions, and a fight to reclaim who Sunny really is. Dark in some spots and adorable in others, it's honestly one of my favorite games of all time. Earthbound, also known as Mother, is a series consisting of 3 games: Mother, Mother 2, and Mother 3. Or for English speakers, Earthbound Beginnings, Earthbound, and Reggie Y.
Come on, Reggie, give us Mother 3! How about this instead?
The games are considered classics, with Earthbound being especially prominent amongst Western fans. Unique mechanics such as a rolling health bar where health is subtracted over time instead of instantly slamming damage help keep the game apart from its peers. Its truly unsettling moments come from the climax, in which you face off against Gygas. Gygus is inspired from writer Shigesato Itoi's childhood memory of walking in on a horror flick in a movie theater and seeing a gruesome and horrifying scene. You can see it culminated in the red and black swirls of Gygus' design, accented with a chilling dialogue about pain and suffering from the monster as you beat down upon him. It's a very visceral depiction, tying off a rather silly and lighthearted RPG experience. The only disturbing part of this game is that people have completed it. Desert Bus is part of a video game collection by Penn & Teller called Smoke and Mirrors. The game is a far too realistic depiction of driving a bus in the desert from Tucson, Arizona to Las Vegas, Nevada. At a blazing speed, 45 miles an hour, this trip takes a whopping 8 real-time hours. But don't worry, not only must you drive from start to finish in one sitting, you let the bus stop or go off the road, you get towed all the way back to Tucson, also in real time. And best of all, when you complete the trip, you score a point. You're prompted for a return trip for another point. Points are obtained in this matter until you reach a score of 99, and a score of 99 is only achievable, of course, after a grueling 33-day-long run of the game. No pauses, no breaks, not even possible, I'd assume. Penn said that the game was a commentary on, at the time, recent concerns surrounding the violent and corrupting media that were video games. His point was that not all games were gruesome. Some were just you, a bus, and 8 hours of sandy driving. Undertale is a game that challenges the RPG genre at its very core. Released in 2015, Undertale took the internet by storm. It was pretty unavoidable then, and people still revere it as a masterclass in RPG game design. You play as Frisk, a human child who's fallen into the monster-infested underground. From there, the game plays in 3 routes. The neutral ending is where you kill none or a few monsters. You fight the Monster King at the end of the game, returning to the surface with a sense of unfulfillment. The pacifist ending is where you kill none of the monsters, instead sparing them from combat, and you fight the reincarnation of the Monster King's son, releasing the monsters back to the surface where they live in peace and harmony amongst the humans. However, the final ending is the darkest yet. Known as the genocide route, you kill and slaughter every single monster you come across, and one of your friends, Sans, stops you before the Monster King. Upon seeing your monster kill count, the blood on your hands begins one of the most infamous fights in all of fiction. Sans is incredibly difficult, throwing tricks and difficult attacks at the player time and time again until he falls. After he's fallen, you have no other choice but to give your soul up to a different fallen human child in order to continue playing the game, irreversibly altering your game data for good. This is the first game on the chart I actually have never heard about, and that's a crime. Jazzpunk is a game set in an alternate reality where Japan conquered the US in World War II. Taking place during the Cold War, the game is absolutely absurd, with most actions resulting in things I can say only resemble a Looney Tunes plot. Minigames such as Wedding Quake, a wedding-themed Quake game, and a first-person Street Fighter that pits you against some Honda. The game is chock full of different gags and jokes alongside pop culture references and a freaky set of hands. It's good fun, and I almost feel robbed I haven't heard about it until now. Katamari is a game franchise all based around the rolling of balls. More specifically, it's about the replacement of the stars in the sky. First releasing in 2005, Katamari Damacy stars a young prince who's tasked by his father to replace all the stars in the night sky that said father or king destroyed. And so, you set off across a multitude of levels to roll the stars back up into existence. This involves you rolling around a ball, collecting objects like a snowball until your ball is so large that you pick up pets, people, cars, homes. Nothing is off limits. It's one of those games that you don't think is really weird until you sit down and think about the billions in property damage you cause simply by rolling around a little snowball. One of the goats of the horror genre. Silent Hill is a franchise that's in a bit of a limbo at the moment, but its influence on horror cannot be overstated. It's a franchise that dabbles in the dark and macabre, tackling subjects like anxiety, trauma, and religion in a very surreal and terrifying way. Some of the most iconic monsters and villains spawn from this series, such as the iconic Pyramid Head and the blood-chilling nurses. Despite Konami's insistence on bastardizing their franchises and turning them into pachinko games, Silent Hill has left an unforgettable impact in horror and darker theming in art. Released in 1996, Harvester is a point-and-click horror adventure game. Stylized in both mid-90s 3D CGI and classy 90s FMV, you play as an amnesiac named Steve and explore the town of Harvest. Find yourself surrounded by a cast of caricatures and cliches as you yourself begin to descend into swaths of homicide and brutalities. Blood, gore, and general lewdness cover the walls and streets of the small town of Harvest, most of such acts committed by your own hands. The game was a forgotten, commercial, and critical flop, with the commentaries it had on violence and media being buried under confusing and jarring battles, pitting you against zombies and chess pieces alike. Despite this, it still tops top 10 goriest game ever list, so it has that going for it. Xenoclash is a game that is as unique as it is violent. It was released to accolades in 2009, winning Independent Game of the Year from PC Gamer magazine. Play as a human named Gat, fighting in a first-person perspective with a mix of guns, hands, and other melee weapons. Being forced into exile after killing your father-mother, you fight against hordes of combatants in an endless sea of fists and violence. Many strange creatures are spotted as you journey on, but the enemies you find yourself fighting against are almost always humanoid. Despite the large amounts of violence, I didn't find any bloodshed in my research, which really sets this game apart from the entries beforehand. It's capable of being violent and eccentric without drowning the player in a sea of blood and gore, and for that, I commend it. You might not know the name, but you definitely know these games. Known for the heavy use of VHS recording aesthetics to mimic home video recordings from the 80s and 90s, Puppet Combo have been creating horror titles since 2013. One of their most infamous titles is the Power Drill Massacre, with its low poly gore and cheesy horror tropes recreating some of the best campiness horror from the 80s. Another popular title is Nun Massacre, where similar visual elements and genius tension design come together to create a game that never fails to make the player jump in their seat. These aren't their only titles, and Puppet Combo has a reputation of releasing banger after banger. Any of the games that they touch are surely worth a look, and they're actually pretty cheap too. Post Void is a difficult game to explain. Releasing in 2020, it's a fast-paced first-person shooter with a goal as old as time: achieve a high score. That is, if you can survive the bright flashes of neon color and screeching of enemies long since slain. It's also a roguelike, so each floor you complete gives you the freedom of new upgrades, keeping each run feeling fresh. Blood and gore in this game washes over your view over and over, coating your field of view in viscera time and time again. You hold your health bar in your hands, represented by an idol that fills and drains with liquid based on your damage intake and output. There's a little story or things to take away from the experience, but Post Void is a great example of the phrase, "It's not about the destination, but the journey." American McGee's Alice is a twist on the childhood classic tale of Alice's adventures in Wonderland. From the year 2000, it has a striking art direction that really helps it stand out from its peers. Taking the story of Alice, it twists it into a story of survivor's guilt. You play as Alice as you venture through your own mind to overcome your feelings of guilt after losing your family to a house fire. There's quite the arsenal of weapons at hand, most resembling children's toys. A personal favorite is the Vorpal Blade, which lets you take off the heads of your enemies with a well-aimed throw. It's difficult to really stand apart in both the 3D adventure game space and in the space of the reimaginings of Alice in Wonderland, but American McGee executed it well, leaving an unforgettable yet disturbing look at the human mind. If you want infamous and edgy, look no further. Hong Kong 97 is an incredibly simple shoot-'em-up style game released in 1995. It's wrapped in layers of political satire of video games as a whole, and criticisms of the Chinese government. The game has no definitive ending, despite having a final boss for you to fight. The graphics are mind-numbingly simple, and it's been panned by critics from all over due to a lack of any redeeming qualities. It's known for two things, outside its awful gameplay and design. First, the Angry Video Game Nerd did a pretty solid episode on the game way back when. Second, your game over screen has an actual real picture of a dead body. A real corpse, just in the game. Props for being the only game so far to have the most realistic depiction of death, I suppose. Deadly Premonition is divisiveness given form via software. Released in 2010 and still being ported to the Nintendo Switch all the way in 2019, it's hard to say if the game is worth its merits or not. To some, it's a game so bad it's good, something like watching The Room while drunk with a few friends. For others, it's a complete write-off with nonsensical cutscenes, awkward delivery, no sense of immersion, and a forgettable story.
Pleasure to meet you, Agent Morgan. We've been expecting you.
I'm Thomas McLean, the sheriff's assistant.
character you pilot is a rather awkward FBI agent tasked with solving the case of the Raincoat murders in a sleepy Washington town. Some plot about DID and a mysterious homicide, but most of the game is wrapped in so much awkwardness and muddled representations of trauma and gore that many horror elements are often ineffective due to the audience being unable to really invest in the game. Metafiction and surrealism go hand in hand. Pony Island came out in 2016 to a pretty good buzz of reception. Its execution is masterfully done, with a mixture of endless runner mechanics and meta-awareness of developing a game. Create, bug test, and fix the arcade game Pony Island, which is indeed a game within a game. By interacting outside of the game world inside the game, you complete the game to complete the game, I think. Oh, and also you get to fight the devil and the cybernetic corruptions present in the game's code. The visuals keep you aware of how many layers deep into the game you are and help you really feel like you're not just a player, but a tester, a bug fixer, and maybe just the savior of humanity. A parable is a simple story used to illustrate a moral or spiritual lesson. And Stanley's Parable, or the Stanley Parable, is a moral lesson that is deciphered by the player's own curiosity. Releasing in 2013, the Stanley Parable is a first-person exploration title solely focused around your choices. At first, the game offers you a straightforward narrative with a suave voice narrator to boot. However, as you delve deeper into the office space you occupy, the building that you spawn in, the labyrinths of meta-jokes and sarcasm that sprawls endlessly before you, nothing is as it seems. Endlessly blank corridors lead to impossibly large security complexes and experiments in the art of storytelling. There's so many endings and a way to execute each one that this game is something that someone could really talk about for ages and never fully explain. The Binding of Isaac is a game with an incredible legacy. It's been around since the days of unblocked flash game sites, and it's the gold standard in roguelike gameplay. You play as Isaac, or Maggie, or Judas, or the Blue Baby, or any other of these strange children as you fight your way through the basement and burial ground alike. Each floor is covered in blood, guts, excrement, pills, playing cards, and more. Its top-down style is reminiscent of the first Legend of Zelda game, and the infinite combination of things you can smash together to make your bullet tears blow up things is mind-boggling. It's a game that has theming of religion, abuse, trauma, all wrapped in a package that seems eager to smile behind its rather dark mask. And it has hundreds of hours of replayability. It's one of my favorite games of all time. An unloved until recently child of Nintendo, Pikmin is a real-time strategy series first arriving in 2001 for the Nintendo GameCube. It tells the story of Hoko Tate Freight Company employee Captain Olimar and the exploits of the unknown planet he crash lands on. Your objective is to repair your ship with the aid of Pikmin, these colorful little guys who do all sorts of stuff. They lift things, they deal damage, they die, they actually do a lot of dying. At first, the game seems adorable, what with your little companions helping you complete small puzzles. However, once you realize how helpless you really are in this great big world, it starts to sink in how vulnerable a little guy like Olimar really is. Tomodachi Life is like if a child's dollhouse suddenly sprang to life. Released in 2013, it stars me, or I guess you as a me, in an island apartment lifestyle. You complete simple tasks for the islanders, which allows you to make more me's and get them into more situations. The unease sets in when you see the small lookalikes you create begin to take on lives of their own. They're silly at first, but as time goes on, they start to get a bit more and more unhinged.
Abortion. Genocide. Mommy. Testicle.
Then they start kissing and making children, and then you have to name the offspring. It's a god sim for people that want to have as little control as possible. Live service has never been so elastic. In 2009, the world was blessed with the release of Nobi Nobi Boy. The game is about the titular boy and his Nobi Nobiness, or how much he can stretch. You stretch around and eat objects, which allows you to stretch more. You keep on growing and growing, collecting points as you do so. During the game's initial release, there was a character you could submit points to named Girl. Girl wanted to stretch across the entire solar system. Beginning on Earth, Girl had to stretch to the Moon, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Neptune, Pluto, and stretch back towards the Sun, ultimately to Earth again to unite the solar system in harmony. This was all done by live player submissions of points from across the globe. Despite its childish art style, it is a bit strange to see such an elastic character be so contorted. Deltarune is a game that's still releasing, with chapters 1 and 2 of the game available to play at the time of recording. Developed by the same person who created Undertale, Deltarune also deals with monsters, the apocalypse, and a cast of returning and new characters. You play as Chris, a teenager who is pulled into a closet, and further, a dark world that spells doom for the world we reside in. Gameplay consists of usual RPG turn-based goodness, complete with memorable boss fights and an amazing soundtrack to top it all off. Despite not being fully released, the game is quite the cultural phenomenon, garnering waves of internet notoriety whenever new content is released. Have you ever played Gary's Mod and loaded up a game of Prop Hunt and wondered, what if the props hunted the humans instead? Quench your curiosity with Golden Light. Released in 2022, this game is a horror roguelike with a nice sense of humor. You walk between two different realms with gore-filled monsters popping out of ordinary objects in the world to attack you. Between each run, you can find different items such as fish heads or finger-covered eyes with weapons like pipes, or you can even use your map. It's a very bizarre game, with many elements being difficult to decipher at a glance. However, it's a fresh breath of air for the horror genre. This marks the first time a game has made me nauseous in my research. Lisa is a short series about childhood abuse, trauma, drug abuse, and neglect. It tells the story of a family in complete disrepair, with a terrible, horrible father at the helm and two neglected at best, abused at worst children in tow. The first game retells the methods that the titular Lisa uses to cope with the abuse of her father. It borrows heavily from Yume Nikki in gameplay's aesthetics, and some may argue in subject and matter as well. The metaphors are a bit on the nose, but when you realize whose head you're looking into, it's easy to see why and exactly how terrifying that really is. In the next game, Lisa the Painful sees Lisa's brother Brad in a terrible state. In a post-apocalyptic world, he's forced to fight tooth and nail for his adopted daughter, Buddy. Haunted by the memories of his deceased sister, he forces his way through a drug and apocalypse-addled world. The game is incredibly brutal at times, however it does keep a good sense of humor at its disposal. If you're ever scared of AI taking over the world, give this game an install. Facade is an interactive stage play released in 2005 which showed off the, at the time, astounding potential of AI in gaming. You are invited to dinner with your friends Trip and Grace at their New York apartment. However, things quickly escalate into a domestic dispute in which the words you type hold a sway over the conversation. You can really type anything, and the AI will try its best to react appropriately. You can either drive them apart, heal the relationship, or be forcefully exiled from the room by saying they deem unbelievable.
Diana! I'm so happy you could make it.
All jokes aside, the game is truly impressive for its showcase of AI technology, being able to parse context in the blink of an eye. But if you unfocus your eyes, you can see that you're just talking to a computer program in your room, all alone, with these two creepy faces staring back at you. Superliminal is a title that arrived in 2019 and is all about playing with the player's perspective. You're in a dream scenario, stuck as a doctor helps guide you out of said dream. Many puzzles involve picking up an object, pushing it away to shrink, or towards you to grow, and allowing that item to be used in a platforming sequence. It's a truly genius way of mixing optical illusions that are commonplace in things like art or other media and the viewpoints that most gamers are familiar with to create engaging and interesting puzzles. That detail of being stuck in a dream, though, it's kind of scary. Fran Bow is an adventure game released in 2015. It's similar to many other adventure games in which you have to use your inventory to collect items and craft them together to solve puzzles. Where it differs in is its subject matter. The game tells the story of a trauma-ridden girl named Fran who witnesses the murder of her parents at the age of 10. Alone and deep in the woods, she's found and taken to a nearby asylum and immediately given medication. When she takes these pills, the world fills with evil writings, blood smears, and horrors that all reside within her mind. She looks to escape her prison. There are several twists and turns of the demonic and cerebral throughout the game, and it's a heavily stylized journey through several terrifying set pieces. Antichamber is a first-person puzzle exploration game all about the concept of the non-Euclidean structure. I wish I could explain what non-Euclidean shapes are, but it's full of really big words and I know what none of them mean. So instead I'll say they're shapes that don't make sense and shapes that morph and change based on how you view them. Antichamber has you explore several structures with these shapes and other seemingly impossible shapes as guidelines. There's no real plot or story, just a lot of really interesting and honestly difficult spaces to navigate, and it's got plenty of ways to make a player go, huh? Limbo is a puzzle platformer game released in 2010. It's a very visual heavy game with dark gradients covering the walls and floors of the game. Every enemy looks like it towers over you with ease, and you can see the powerful, intimidating shape of each obstacle and foe before you. There's not much of a story to parse, as you simply guide a young boy to save his sister. However, what it may lack in story, it more than makes up for in gameplay and style. The game is all about trial and error, with many deaths being quite gruesome. It's almost reminiscent of a surreal rage game, like Cat Mario. You're supposed to die figuring out how these traps work, but once you do figure it out, the run all comes together nice and smooth. And our final entry on this tier, The Silver Case. Released in 1999, it's a visual novel adventure that sees the HCU, or Heinous Crime Units, to solve a new murder spree that's popped up in the fictional Ward 24 district of the real Tokyo, Japan. The crimes closely match a government assassin's work named Kamui Uehara. This assassin, believed to be hospitalized, appears to be on the loose once more. An interesting note is that, despite being released in 1999, the game didn't see a Western release until 2016. The cited causes for delay were how heavy-handed the puzzles were in utilizing the Japanese language for its puzzles, as well as a mountain of text for some poor translator to sift through. However, the game has received many reviews singing its praises for its depictions of politics, horror, and social commentary circa 1999. That's the first tier down. The next tiers are going to be way bigger from here on out. I really enjoyed researching all these games though. I might honestly try a few out, especially Post Void. That one looked cool as hell. If you made it here, thanks for watching. I do intend on tackling the rest of the tiers in the future, so expect that in the coming days. But that's all for me for now. I'll see you later.